The stars looked different from the bridge of the alien scout ship Shadow's Edge. Commander Vex Tar stood with his 4 arms crossed behind his back, watching the blue and green planet grow larger on the main screen. His gray skin had darker patches that showed his worry, though he tried to hide it from his crew. "How long until we reach scanning range?" he asked his navigation officer. 2 Earth hours, Commander," came the reply from Telmar, whose voice carried the typical clicking sounds of their species. Vextar nodded slowly. This was supposed to be a simple mission. The Zephyrian Empire had been expanding across the galaxy for thousands of years. They found new worlds, studied them, and then took them over. It was always the same pattern. Send scouts, count the enemy. Forces, find their weaknesses, then attack with superior numbers. Intelligence Officer Kira then walked up to stand beside her commander. Her smaller frame and lighter gray skin marked her as coming from the northern regions of their home world. She carried a data pad in her lower hands while her upper hands gestured as she spoke. "The initial long-range scans show this species has basic spaceflight," she said. "They have reached their moon and built some small stations. Their technology appears to be several hundred years behind ours." "Good," Vexatar replied. "That means this should be quick. How many warriors do you estimate?" Kira then looked at her datapad again. "Based on similar civilizations we have encountered, I would guess no more than 50,000 trained fighters, possibly 100,000 if they conscript civilians." The commander made a sound that was like a human laugh, but deeper. 100,000. Our advance fleet alone has twice that number. This will be easier than the Corvin system." The ship moved silently through space, its cloaking device making it invisible to most forms of detection. The Zephyrians had perfected this technology long ago. It bent light around the ship and masked its energy signature. No primitive species had ever detected one of their scout vessels. On the lunar surface, Lieutenant Jake Morrison was having a boring day. He sat in the Luna Defense Station, monitoring sensor readings that never showed anything interesting. Earth had built this station only 5 years ago, and most people thought it was a waste of money. What were they defending against? There had never been any proof of alien life. Jake was 26 years old and had joined the Space Defense Corps right out of college. His parents had wanted him to be a doctor, but he loved technology and space. The pay was good, and he got to work with the most advanced equipment Earth had ever built. He was drinking his 3rd cup of coffee when something strange appeared on his screen. The gravitational sensors were picking up a small distortion about 50,000 kilometers away. It was moving in a pattern that did not match any known asteroid or space debris. "That's weird," Jake said to himself. He ran the data through the computer again, but the results were the same. Something was out there, and it was moving with purpose. Jake called his supervisor, Captain Lisa Hayes. She was a tough woman in her 40s who had been in the military for 20 years. She ran the Luna Defense Station with military precision and did not tolerate mistakes. "Captain Hayes here?" Her voice came through the communicator. "Ma'am, I'm seeing some unusual readings on the gravitational sensors. There appears to be an object moving in our vicinity, but visual and radar show nothing." There was a pause. "Send me the data." Jake transmitted the sensor readings to the captain's office. A few minutes later, she called back. "This is interesting. Morrison, the movement pattern suggests intelligence. Natural objects don't move like this. Do you think it could be a cloaked vessel, ma'am? I don't know what else it could be. I'm alerting Earth Command. Keep monitoring and record everything." Captain Hayes immediately contacted the Unified Defense Command on Earth. The duty officer that day was Colonel Frank Turner, a veteran of 30 years who had seen many false alarms but took every report seriously. "A cloaked vessel?" Colonel Turner asked. "That's a big assumption, Captain." "Yes, sir, but the data is clear. Something is out there using technology we don't recognize." Colonel Turner looked at the information on his screen. The gravitational distortion was small but consistent. If it was a ship, it was not very large. Still, if Earth was being visited by aliens, this was the most important moment in human history. "I'm putting all defense stations on alert," he said. "Double the sensor sweeps and prepare for possible first contact." Meanwhile, aboard the Shadow's Edge, the aliens were beginning their detailed scans of Earth. The planet was larger than they had expected, with vast oceans and several major land masses. The population appeared to be in the billions, which was surprising for such a young species. "Commander," said Morden, the ship's senior analyst, "I'm getting some unusual readings from the surface." "What kind of readings?" "Large gatherings of individuals in organized formations. It appears they may be conducting some form of military training." Vex-Tar was not concerned. Most species had some form of military organization. Even the weakest civilizations trained a few thousand warriors. "Show me," he said. The main screen changed to show an aerial view of a large field on Earth. Thousands of humans in matching uniforms were moving in perfect formations. They marched in straight lines, turned in unison, and carried what appeared to be weapons. "How many are there?" Vex-Tar asked. Morden counted quickly. "Approximately 20,000 in this gathering, Commander." 20,000? Kira then sounded surprised. "That seems like a lot for a training exercise." "Perhaps this is their entire military," Vex-Tar said. "They may be showing off their full strength." But as they watched, more groups appeared on the screen. The humans seemed to have multiple training areas, each with thousands of uniformed individuals. The aliens had expected to see a few hundred warriors at most, but these numbers were much higher. "Scan the other continents," Vex-Tar ordered. "Let's see what their total military strength looks like." As Morden began scanning other parts of Earth, the numbers kept growing. Each major landmass seemed to have multiple military installations, each with thousands of humans in training. On Earth, Admiral Karen Wright was reviewing the latest reports from Luna Defense Station. As head of Space Command, she took any potential threat seriously. The idea of a cloaked alien vessel was both exciting and terrifying. "How reliable is this data?" she asked her staff. "The gravitational sensors are very accurate, ma'am," replied Major Tony Clark. "If something is out there, these readings would show it." Admiral Wright had spent her career preparing for this possibility. Earth's military had grown dramatically in recent decades, partly due to the fear that humanity might not be alone in the universe. Now it seemed those fears might be justified. "Alert all commands," she ordered. "If we're being watched, I want to make sure they see our full capabilities." She picked up her secure phone and called General Lisa Park at the Army Command Center. "Lisa, we may have visitors. I need you to activate the Continental Defense Protocols." "How serious is this, Karen?" "Potentially very serious. We're tracking what appears to be a cloaked vessel. If they're studying us for invasion, we need to show them we're not easy prey." General Park understood immediately. Within hours, military bases across North America were increasing their activity levels. Training exercises were expanded, equipment was moved into visible positions, and personnel were called up for active duty. The aliens, still watching from their hidden position, began to notice the increased activity. What had started as observation of a primitive species was becoming something very different. "Commander," Kira then said, her voice showing the first signs of concern, "the humans appear to be responding to our presence." "Impossible," Vex-Tar replied. "They cannot detect us." "Then why are they mobilizing additional forces?" Vex-Tar looked at the screens showing human military bases across several continents. The activity level had increased dramatically in just a few hours. Either this was a remarkable coincidence, or the humans had capabilities the Zephyrians had not expected. "Continue monitoring," he ordered. "We need to understand what we're dealing with." The first day of observation was ending, but already the alien scouts were seeing something that challenged their understanding of how primitive civilizations behaved. The humans were organized on a scale that seemed impossible for such a young species. Tomorrow would bring even greater surprises. The second day brought discoveries that made Commander Vex-Tar question everything he knew about galactic warfare. As the Shadow's Edge continued its hidden observation of Earth, the scale of human military organization became impossible to ignore. "Show me the North American continent again," Vextar ordered from his command chair. The main screen displayed a vast landmass covered with cities, roads, and what appeared to be countless military installations. Morden, the ship's analyst, had been working through the night to count and catalog what they were seeing. "Commander, I've identified over 2,000 separate military facilities on this continent alone," Morden reported, his voice shaking slightly. "Each one appears to house between 5,000 and 50,000 individuals." Kira then moved closer to the screen, her 4 eyes wide with disbelief. "That would mean millions of warriors. Your sensors must be malfunctioning." "I've run diagnostics." 6 times, Morden replied. "The readings are accurate." Vextar stood and walked to the sensor station. In all his years of scouting missions, he had never encountered a civilization with more than a few 100,000 military personnel. The largest army the Zephyrian Empire had ever faced numbered only 80,000. What he was seeing on the screen defied all logic. On Earth, Commander Alex Turner was leading the morning briefing at the North American Defense Corps headquarters. As a career military officer, he commanded respect from the 3 million personnel under his authority. Today's briefing was about the increased alert status that had been ordered from Space Command. "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a potential first contact situation," Turner announced to his staff. "All units are to maintain high visibility operations until further notice." Colonel Maria Santos, who had flown in from South America, nodded her understanding. She commanded another 2 million troops spread across her continent. "My forces are ready, sir. We've activated all reserve units and increased patrol schedules." General Paul Anderson, representing European forces, checked his tablet. "European Command reports full readiness. Our 4 million active personnel are conducting joint exercises to demonstrate our capabilities. The numbers these humans discussed, so casually, would have represented the entire military might of most galactic civilizations. Yet they spoke as if commanding millions of soldiers was normal and routine. Above them, the alien observers struggled to process what they were witnessing. The Shadow's Edge had the most advanced scanning equipment in the Zephyrian fleet, but the numbers it was producing seemed impossible. "Telmar, contact the home fleet," Vextar ordered. "I need to speak with Fleet Admiral Zurgoth immediately." The communication officer's tentacles moved rapidly over his controls. Within minutes, a holographic image of the Fleet Admiral appeared on the bridge. Zurgoth was an old warrior whose scars told the story of dozens of successful conquests. "Commander, Vextar, report your findings," the Admiral's voice carried across the vast distance of space. "Sir, I believe our intelligence regarding this species may be incorrect. They appear to have military forces numbering in the millions." The hologram flickered as Zurgoth leaned forward. "Millions? Repeat that, Commander." "Yes, sir. Our scans indicate at least 10 million organized military personnel, possibly more." There was a long silence. When Zurgoth spoke again, his voice was cold. "Commander, in my 300 years of service, no primitive species has ever fielded more than 100,000 warriors. Check your equipment." "I've run full diagnostics, sir. The readings appear accurate." "Impossible. Continue your observations and report again in 12 hours. Do not return until you have confirmed numbers." The hologram disappeared, leaving the bridge crew in uncomfortable silence. Vextar knew his career depended on getting this right, but the evidence kept pointing to the same incredible conclusion. On Earth's surface, the military demonstrations continued. Admiral Karen Wright had ordered a coordinated show of force that would be visible from space. Military bases across the globe were conducting simultaneous exercises. At Pearl Harbor, Admiral Betty Williams supervised the movement of the Pacific Fleet. 200 warships moved in perfect formation, their crews numbering in the hundreds of thousands. Similar displays were happening in the Atlantic, where Admiral Sam Rodriguez commanded another massive fleet. The aliens watched in growing horror as Earth's oceans filled with military vessels. Their own empire's entire navy consisted of fewer ships than they could see in a single human harbor. "How many ships are moving in the Pacific Ocean?" Vextar asked. Morden's voice was barely a whisper. "Over 1,500 major vessels, Commander. Each one appears to carry between 500 and 3,000 crew members." Intelligence Officer Kira then began calculating frantically. That means naval forces alone could number over 2 million individuals. "And that's just one ocean," added Telmar from his communication station. The revelation grew worse as they observed the Atlantic fleet. More hundreds of ships, more hundreds of thousands of personnel. The humans seemed to have naval forces that exceeded the total population of some Zephyrian worlds, but the ocean displays were nothing compared to what happened next. General Eric Thompson, commanding officer of the Global Defense Initiative, had ordered a simultaneous air show on every continent. The sky above North America suddenly filled with aircraft. Thousands of jets flew in formation, their trails creating patterns visible from space. Similar displays began appearing over Europe, Asia, South America, and Australia. "Count the aircraft," Vextar ordered, though his voice showed he was afraid. Of the answer, Morden worked frantically at his station. "Sir, I'm detecting over 20,000 aircraft currently airborne. Each one requires trained personnel to operate and maintain." Kira then sat down heavily in her chair. 20,000 aircraft would require at least 500,000 support. Personnel. How is this possible? The answer came when they intercepted human military communications. Captain Steve Miller, working at the Pentagon, was coordinating the air displays with his counterparts around the world. "European Command, this is Pentagon Control. Your 12,000 aircraft are looking good from our satellites." "Copy, Pentagon." "Asian Command reports 15,000 aircraft airborne and holding formation." "Excellent." "African Command, what's your status?" 8,000 aircraft ready for the demonstration, Pentagon Control." The aliens listened to these numbers with growing panic. The humans were casually discussing aircraft numbers that exceeded the total military strength of the Zephyrian Empire. "This cannot be real," Vexitar said to himself, but the evidence was overwhelming. The demonstration reached its peak when General Lisa Park activated the Continental Defense Grids. Massive installations rose from hidden underground bunkers across every landmass. These weapons platforms were manned by millions of trained operators. "Sir," Morden reported, his voice now showing clear fear, "I'm detecting large-scale defensive installations emerging from concealed positions. The number of personnel required to operate these systems would be—" "How many?" Vexitar demanded. "Least 20 million trained operators, Commander." The bridge fell silent. In the Zephyrian military, a single installation might be operated by a few hundred individuals. The humans appeared to have defensive systems that required more personnel than the entire Zephyrian fleet. Colonel Dan Roberts, coordinating from the North American Command Center, made a routine announcement that was intercepted by the alien ship. "Attention all units. We're rotating the 3rd Million-Man Division to active status. The 2nd Million-Man Division will stand down for rest and refit." Kira then translated the human communication for her commander. "Sir, they appear to be discussing military units numbered in the millions as if this is routine." "A million-man division?" Vextar repeated. "That's larger than our entire expeditionary force. And they speak of it as just one unit among many," Morden added. As the day progressed, the aliens began to understand that what they were witnessing was not Earth's full military capability, but merely a demonstration. The humans were showing off, but they were showing off with numbers that terrified the observers. Major cities began their own displays. New York, London, Moscow, Beijing, Tokyo, and dozens of other population centers activated their local defense forces. Each city appeared to have more military personnel than most planets in the galaxy. "Commander, Telmar reported from his station. I'm intercepting communications suggesting these are only the active military forces. The humans appear to have additional personnel they call reserves. Reserves? Vextar asked. Backup forces. Sir, personnel who are trained but not currently active. The implication was staggering. If what they were seeing represented only the active military, how many reserve forces did the humans possess? General Tony Clark, speaking from the Army Reserve Command, provided the answer during a briefing that was intercepted by the alien ship. Current reserve activation stands at 50 million personnel, with an additional 200 million in the inactive reserve pool. The numbers hit the alien observers like a physical blow. 250 million reserve forces in addition to the millions they had already counted in active service. How many humans live on this planet? Vextar asked. Morden checked his population scans. Approximately 8 billion, Commander. The third day brought a level of horror that Commander Vextar had never experienced in his long military career. What had started as a routine scouting mission was becoming a nightmare that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Morden, I want you to access their communication networks, Vextar ordered. We need to understand their military structure from the inside. The analyst worked at his station, his tentacles moving with nervous energy. The Zephyrians had advanced computer, systems that could break into most primitive communication networks. Within an hour, they were reading human military databases and intercepting classified communications. Commander, I have access to their military records, Morden reported. The numbers are even worse than we thought. Intelligence Officer Kira then moved to look over his shoulder. What she saw made her skin turn a darker shade of gray, a sign of extreme stress in their species. Show me, Vextar demanded. The main screen filled with human military statistics that seemed to come from a fever dream. Active duty personnel numbered over 500 million across all branches of service. Army forces alone accounted for 200 million soldiers. Naval forces included 150 million sailors and Marines. Air forces employed another 100 million personnel. Space forces, which the humans had only recently created, already had 50 million trained operators. 500 million active military personnel, Vextar said slowly, as if saying the words might make them less real. That's more than the total population of our home world, Kira then whispered. But the active forces were only the beginning of the horror. The human databases showed reserve forces that defied all logic. Trained reserves numbered over 2 billion individuals. These were people who had received military training and could be called to active duty if needed. 2 billion reserves, Morden repeated, his voice shaking. Commander, that's more military personnel than exist in our entire galactic sector. Telmar looked up from his communication station. Sir, I'm intercepting a conversation between human commanders. They're discussing something called emergency conscription protocols. What does that mean? Vextar asked, though he feared the answer. It appears to be a system for rapidly converting civilian population into military forces. According to their communications, they could theoretically mobilize up to 4 billion additional personnel within 6 months. The bridge fell silent. The Zephyrian Empire, with all its conquered worlds and centuries of expansion, had a total military force of 30 million. The humans were casually discussing the ability to field forces numbering in the billions. On Earth, Captain Steve Miller was enjoying his role in the deception. As a military intelligence officer, he understood the importance of information warfare. If aliens were watching, it was crucial that they see humanity as too dangerous to attack. He had been feeding false information into the military databases, inflating numbers and creating fictional units. But what he didn't realize was that his deceptions were adding to figures that were already terrifyingly large by galactic standards. Jenkins, make sure the Omega Division reports show full strength, Miller told his assistant. 25 million. Personnel, all combat ready. The Omega Division didn't exist, but the aliens monitoring human communications heard the number and added it to their growing tally of human military might. Meanwhile, real military operations continued around the globe. General Lisa Park was conducting a massive training exercise involving 12 million troops across North America. The exercise, called Continental Shield, was designed to test America's ability to defend against a large-scale invasion. The aliens watched in terror as millions of uniformed humans moved across the landscape in perfect coordination. Supply. Convoys stretched for hundreds of miles. Artillery positions covered entire mountain ranges. Infantry divisions maneuvered through forests and cities with clockwork precision. How are they coordinating so many individuals? Kira then asked in amazement. Their communication systems are more advanced than we estimated, Morden replied. They can manage millions of units simultaneously. The exercise involved not just ground forces, but also air and naval support. Admiral Kate Johnson commanded a fleet of 800 ships in the Atlantic, while General Tony Clark coordinated air support from over 15,000 aircraft. The aliens had never seen military coordination on such a scale. The largest Zephyrian military exercise had involved 20,000 troops and had been considered a masterpiece of organization. The humans were managing exercises 60 times larger and making it look routine. Commander, Telmar reported. From his station, I'm detecting similar exercises on every continent. The humans appear to be conducting global military training involving over 50 million personnel. 50 million in training exercises alone? Vextar felt his legs weaken. What are they preparing for? The answer came from an intercepted communication between human commanders. Admiral Susan Bell was briefing her staff at the Global Defense Command. Ladies and gentlemen, these exercises are designed to prepare for the possibility of extraterrestrial invasion. Our intelligence suggests we may not be alone in the universe. Colonel Frank Turner nodded his agreement. Our space monitoring stations have detected anomalous readings. We must assume we're being observed and possibly evaluated as a target. Therefore, Admiral Bell continued, we will demonstrate to any potential invaders that Earth is not defenseless. Our military capabilities must be clearly visible to discourage any aggressive action. The aliens listened to this conversation with growing dread. The humans knew they were being watched, and they were deliberately showing off their military strength as a warning. They know we're here, Vextar said quietly. How is that possible? Kira then asked. Our cloaking technology is perfect. Apparently not perfect enough for these humans. The demonstrations continued throughout the day, each one more impressive than the last. Major cities activated their defense systems, revealing hidden military installations that the aliens had missed in their earlier scans. New York revealed underground bunkers housing 2 million soldiers. London activated defense platforms manned by another 1 million personnel. Moscow demonstrated missile systems operated by 3 million trained specialists. Beijing showed off military factories employing 5 million workers in weapons production. Each revelation added to the aliens' growing understanding that they had stumbled upon a military civilization unlike anything in galactic history. The horror reached new levels when they intercepted communications about Earth's industrial capacity. Colonel Dan Roberts was briefing his logistics staff about wartime production capabilities. In the event of invasion, our factories can produce military equipment at the following rates, Roberts announced. Small arms production can reach 50 million units per month. Vehicle production can hit 2 million units per month. Aircraft production capacity is 500,000 units per month. Morden translated these numbers for his commander. Sir, they can produce more military equipment in 1 month than our entire empire possesses. And they have the personnel to use it all, Kira then added weakly. The industrial capacity was supported by a civilian population that seemed designed for military support. Every major city had factories that could be converted to weapons production. Universities trained millions of engineers and technicians. The entire society appeared structured to support massive military operations. It's as if their entire civilization exists to wage war, Vextar observed. The day's most terrifying revelation came when they accessed human historical records. The databases showed that humans had been fighting wars for thousands of years, constantly improving their military capabilities. Recent conflicts had involved hundreds of millions of participants. "Commander," Morden reported, his voice barely audible, "their historical records show a conflict they call World War II. It involved over 100 million military personnel and lasted 6 years. 100 million people fighting for 6 years? Vextar couldn't comprehend the scale. How did their civilization survive? According to their records, they rebuilt and became stronger afterward. The aliens were beginning to understand that humans were not just a species with large military forces. They were a species that had evolved through constant warfare, developing the ability to field armies on a scale that other civilizations couldn't imagine. As night fell on Earth, the military demonstrations continued under artificial lighting. The humans seemed determined to show that their capabilities were not limited by darkness or weather conditions. Admiral Rachel Foster commanded nighttime naval exercises involving 1,000 ships and 500,000 personnel. General Sam Rodriguez coordinated night air operations with 20,000 aircraft. Colonel Amy Davis led ground forces through complex urban warfare training involving 3 million soldiers. The aliens watched these nighttime operations with a mixture of awe and terror. The humans could conduct military operations around the clock with forces that never seemed to rest or diminish in capability. "How many hours per day do they maintain military operations?" Vextar asked. "All 24 hours, Commander," Telmar replied. "They operate in shifts to maintain continuous readiness." The fourth day shattered every assumption the Zephyrian Empire had ever made about military organization and galactic warfare. Commander Vextar no longer slept, spending his time staring at data displays that showed numbers his mind refused to accept. "Extend scanning range to include the entire solar system," he ordered. "I need to know the full extent of their military presence." What they discovered beyond Earth's atmosphere defied all rational thought. The humans had militarized their entire solar system in ways that no civilization had ever attempted. "Commander," Morden reported, his voice hollow with shock, "I'm detecting massive installations on Earth's moon. The structures appear to house millions of personnel. The lunar bases were hidden beneath the moon's surface, invisible to casual observation, but clearly revealed by the advanced Zephyrian sensors." Commander Rachel Foster supervised these installations, managing a population that exceeded most planetary civilizations. "How many humans are stationed on the moon?" Vextar asked. "Approximately 15 million military personnel, sir. They appear to be operating mining facilities, weapons platforms, and training centers. 15 million soldiers on an airless rock. The Zephyrian Empire had never established military bases with more than a few thousand personnel, and those were considered major installations. But the moon was only the beginning. Mars, the fourth planet from the sun, revealed even more shocking discoveries. The red planet had been transformed into what appeared to be a military training ground on a scale that boggled the mind. Mars shows signs of extensive terraforming and military construction, Intelligence Officer Kira then reported. "I'm detecting training facilities that could accommodate tens of millions of personnel." General Tony Clark commanded the Martian Military Academy, where Earth's most elite forces received advanced training. The planet's surface was covered with military installations, each one capable of housing and training more soldiers than most species could imagine. "The Martian facilities appear to be training approximately 30 million personnel at any given time," Morden added. "They cycle troops through in groups, suggesting they can train hundreds of millions over time." Vextar stared at the screen, showing Mars covered with military bases stretching from pole to pole. "They turned an entire planet into a military school?" "It appears so, Commander." But even Mars paled in comparison to what they found in the asteroid belt. The humans had established mining operations throughout the belt, but these were no ordinary mining facilities. Each asteroid had been converted into a fortress. Admiral Kate Johnson oversaw these operations from the largest asteroid base, which housed over 5 million personnel. Hundreds of smaller asteroids each contained military installations with tens of thousands of soldiers. The asteroid belt installations total approximately 50 million personnel, Morden reported. They're mining materials while simultaneously maintaining a defensive network throughout the belt. 50 million soldiers scattered across thousands of asteroids, Kira then said weakly. They've created a defensive network that would take years to overcome. The asteroid fortresses were connected by a fleet of military vessels that patrolled constantly between installations. Fleet Captain Sam Rodriguez commanded over 10,000 ships in the asteroid belt alone, more vessels than the entire Zephyrian Navy possessed. But the most shocking discovery was yet to come. Deep space scans revealed massive construction projects near Jupiter, the system's largest planet. "Commander, you need to see this," Morden said, his voice barely above a whisper. The main screen showed Jupiter's orbital space filled with construction platforms building warships of enormous size. Each vessel under construction was larger than anything in the Zephyrian fleet, and there were hundreds of them in various stages of completion. Admiral Betty Williams supervised the Jupiter shipyards from a command station that housed 2 million construction workers and naval personnel. The shipyards operated around the clock, churning out vessels that would each require crews of thousands. "How many ships are under construction?" Vextar asked. "Over 800 major vessels, Commander. Each one appears designed to carry between 5,000 and 20,000 crew members. That's enough for fleet operations involving millions of personnel," Kira then calculated. "And they're building them at an incredible rate. At current construction speed, they could launch 50 new ships per month." The implications were staggering. The humans were not just maintaining massive military forces. They were expanding those forces at a rate that would soon make them the dominant military power in the galaxy. On Earth, the Unified Defense Command was coordinating these operations with casual efficiency. General Nick Hayes supervised planetary coordination while Admiral Susan Bell managed interplanetary communications. "Jupiter reports construction ahead of schedule," Admiral Bell announced during a routine briefing. "We'll have the new battle group operational 2 months early." "Excellent," General Hayes replied. "That will bring our total space-based forces to over 100 million personnel." The aliens intercepted this communication and added another 100 million to their tally of human military strength. The numbers had become so large that they no longer seemed real. "Commander," Telmar reported from his station, "I'm detecting communication traffic suggesting even larger operations." "Larger than what we've already seen?" Vexitar asked in disbelief. "Yes, sir. They appear to be discussing something called the Deep Space Initiative." The Deep Space Initiative, as they soon learned, involved sending massive military expeditions to nearby star systems. The humans were not content to militarize their own solar system. They were preparing to expand their military presence throughout local space. Colonel Frank Turner briefed his staff on the initiative's progress. Phase 1 involves establishing military bases in the Alpha Centauri system. We'll be deploying an initial force of 20 million personnel. 20 million just for the first phase? Major Amy Davis asked. That's correct. Phase 2 will expand operations to 10 additional star systems, with total deployment reaching over 200 million personnel. The aliens listened to this, discussion with growing horror. The humans were planning to deploy forces larger than the entire Zephyrian Empire across multiple star systems. They're not defending their world, Vextar realized. They're preparing for galactic conquest. The evidence supported this conclusion. Human military planning documents, accessed through their computer networks, revealed strategic plans for expansion across dozens of star systems. Each system would be garrisoned with forces numbering in the tens of millions. They're planning to establish military dominance over this entire region of the galaxy, Kira then said, her voice filled with dread. The scope of human military planning extended far beyond anything the Zephyrian Empire had ever conceived. While most civilizations struggled to maintain forces on a single world, the humans were planning military operations across light years of space. President Harold Martinez addressed his military leaders in a conference that was intercepted by the alien observers. Our expansion into neighboring systems is not just about exploration. We must ensure that humanity has the military presence necessary to defend our interests. Defense Secretary Linda Torres nodded her agreement. Our projections show we can maintain garrison forces totaling 500 million personnel across 20 star systems within the next decade. 500 million personnel deployed across 20 star systems. The numbers had moved beyond, shocking into the realm of the impossible. The Zephyrian Empire's total military accumulated over centuries of conquest was smaller than what the humans planned to deploy as garrison forces. Commander, Morden reported, I'm detecting additional military installations that we missed in our earlier scans. More installations? Vextar felt numb. How many more? Hidden facilities throughout Earth's ocean floors. They appear to be underwater military bases housing millions of additional personnel. The ocean floor bases were managed by Admiral Rachel Foster, who commanded submarine forces that the aliens had not previously detected. These underwater installations housed another 50 million military personnel and operated submarine fleets numbering in the thousands. Underwater bases, Vextar repeated mechanically. They militarized their ocean floors, too. Commander, there's more. I'm detecting similar installations under the polar ice caps, another 20 million personnel in Arctic bases. The humans had literally militarized every environment on their planet. Underground bases, underwater facilities, Arctic installations, orbital platforms, lunar colonies, Martian academies, asteroid fortresses, and deep space construction yards. Every possible location that could house military forces had been developed and populated. How is this sustainable, Akira then asked. How can any civilization support such massive military expenditures? The answer came from intercepted economic data. The human economy was structured to support military operations on an unimaginable scale. Military spending represented a significant portion of their total economic output, but their industrial capacity was so vast that it could easily support forces numbering in the billions. The fifth day brought the final revelation that shattered Commander Vextar's sanity and sent the Shadow's Edge fleeing in terror across the void of space. The transmission to Fleet Admiral Zergoth had been sent during the night, carrying sensor, data and reports that documented military forces beyond galactic comprehension. Vextar expected disbelief, demands for verification, perhaps even accusations of equipment failure or crew incompetence. Instead, the reply that came back was a single urgent message. Abort mission immediately. Return to base. Do not engage. Do not communicate further. Sir, Telmar reported from his communication station, Fleet Admiral Zergoth is ordering immediate withdrawal. Based on our report? Vextar asked. Yes, Commander. The Admiral stated that our findings represent a threat level beyond current military protocols. But before they could begin their retreat, the humans provided one final demonstration that would haunt the alien observers for the rest of their lives. General Nick Hayes had declared the day a global military celebration, designed to honor Earth's defense forces and demonstrate their readiness to any potential threats. What followed was a display of military might that exceeded even the aliens' worst fears. Commander, every major population center on Earth is activating military formations, Morden reported, his voice shaking with terror. The main screen showed a planet-wide mobilization that defied all logic. Every city, every town, every settlement was revealing military forces that had been hidden or disguised as civilian populations. New York activated underground facilities housing 12 million soldiers. London revealed defensive positions manned by 8 million personnel. Moscow demonstrated missile installations operated by 15 million specialists. Beijing showed military factories employing 20 million workers. Tokyo activated naval facilities with 6 million sailors and marines. Each major city has more military personnel than our entire home fleet, Kira then whispered. But the urban forces were nothing compared to what emerged from rural areas. Vast training camps that had been camouflaged as farmland revealed themselves to contain millions of additional troops. Mountain ranges opened to show massive bunker complexes. Forests disclosed hidden military installations. The entire planet is a military base, Vextar said in horror. Admiral Susan Bell coordinated the global demonstration from the Pentagon, managing a display that involved over 400 million active personnel simultaneously. Her casual efficiency in commanding such vast numbers spoke to a level of military sophistication that the aliens had never imagined possible. Sector 7 reports 12 million personnel ready for demonstration, came one report. Sector 15 shows 18 million. Troops in formation, came another. Orbital platforms report 25 million personnel standing by. The numbers flowed in from around the globe and throughout the solar system. Each report added millions more to the tally of human military strength. But the true horror began when Colonel Frank Turner made an announcement that broke the aliens' understanding of reality itself. Ladies and gentlemen, today's demonstration involves our active military forces. Tomorrow, we will conduct a reserve mobilization exercise involving all trained reserve personnel. Major Amy Davis checked her tablet and provided the number that sent the alien observers into complete panic. Sir, total reserve activation will involve approximately 12 billion personnel. 12 billion. The number hit the alien bridge like a physical blow. 12 billion trained military personnel held in reserve, ready for activation if needed. 12 billion, Morden repeated, his voice barely audible. That's more than the total population of our entire star cluster. It's impossible, Kira then said, but the evidence was undeniable. The humans were not just a militaristic species. They were a civilization where nearly every individual received military training and could be called to serve if needed. Their society was structured so that activation of reserves could field military forces larger than the combined populations of most galactic sectors. Commander, Telmar reported, his communication equipment detecting massive data flows. They're beginning preliminary activation procedures for the reserve demonstration. What followed was a mobilization that the aliens watched in complete terror. Across Earth, ordinary civilians began transforming into military units. Factory workers revealed themselves as trained soldiers. Teachers activated as communications specialists. Farmers emerged as logistics experts. Students became technical support personnel. The entire civilian population has military training, Vextar realized. Every human is a potential soldier. The mobilization continued throughout the day, with more and more civilians revealing military capabilities. Shopping centers became supply depots. Schools transformed into command centers. Hospitals activated as military medical facilities. President Harold Martinez addressed the planet during the mobilization, his words intercepted by the terrified alien observers. Citizens of Earth, today we demonstrate to the universe that humanity will never be defenseless. Every one of our 8 billion people has received military training. Every community can become a fortress. Every city can field an army. 8 billion people with military training. The number represented military potential that exceeded the wildest nightmares of galactic strategists. Defense Secretary Linda Torres provided additional details that completed the picture of human military capability. Our current demonstration involves only a fraction of our total capacity. Full mobilization protocols could activate every trained individual on Earth within 72 hours. The aliens realized they were not observing a military force. They were observing an entire civilization designed for warfare. Every human was a potential soldier. Every location was a potential military base. Every resource was available for military use. "Commander, we must leave immediately," Kira then pleaded. "If they detect us during this mobilization, we could face billions of hostile forces." Vextar needed no convincing. The Shadow's Edge began its withdrawal procedures, but the humans provided one final shock that would echo through Zephyrian nightmares for generations. As the ship prepared to jump to hyperspace, they intercepted a casual conversation between Colonel Dan Roberts and Major Jennifer Hayes about future military planning. "The Venus terraforming project is ahead of schedule," Roberts mentioned. "We should be able to station our first billion-person garrison there within 5 years. "Excellent," Hayes replied. "That will bring our total interplanetary forces to over 2 billion personnel. A billion-person garrison on Venus. 2 billion interplanetary forces. The humans were planning military deployments that would exceed the total populations of most galactic civilizations. They're not just defending their system," Vexitar said as the ship entered hyperspace. "They're preparing to dominate the galaxy." The journey back to Zephyrian space took weeks, but the crew barely spoke during the entire trip. The sensor data, they carried documented military capabilities that challenged the fundamental assumptions of galactic warfare. Upon reaching the Zephyrian fleet, Commander Vextar's report triggered an immediate strategic revolution. Fleet Admiral Zurgoth called an emergency session of the War Council, where the impossible numbers were presented to military leaders who refused to believe them. 12 billion reserve forces? Questioned Supreme Commander Velnash. "That exceeds our entire species' population." "The sensor data is accurate, sir," Vextar replied. "We verified it multiple times." "And they can mobilize these forces across multiple star systems?" "Yes, sir. Their industrial capacity and organizational capabilities exceed anything in our historical records." The War Council spent days analyzing the data, looking for errors, explanations, anything that would make the numbers smaller. But every analysis confirmed the same terrifying conclusion. Humanity possessed military capabilities that rendered traditional galactic warfare obsolete. "What are your recommendations, Commander?" asked Velnash. "Immediate withdrawal from all sectors adjacent to human space. Establishment of defensive positions at least 50 light-years from their territory. Classification of humanity as a level. 10 existential threat. Level 10 was a classification that had never been used in Zephyrian military history. It was reserved for threats that could potentially destroy their entire civilization. You're recommending we treat them as if they could conquer our empire?" "Sir, based on what we observed, they could conquer our empire without deploying more than a fraction of their total forces." The War Council voted unanimously to accept Vexitar's recommendations. Within days, Zephyrian forces began withdrawing from border regions. Defensive alliances were activated. Emergency protocols designed for species survival were implemented. But the greatest change was psychological. The Zephyrian Empire had spent millennia as the dominant military power in their region of the galaxy. Now they cowered behind defensive lines, terrified of a species that didn't even know they existed.